This homepage had personality, music, chocolate, blog post, a clever brand name, but there was just one problem. It wasn't clear what Steve actually does or that he's even for hire. In this Grady Jam, we dig into the hidden strengths of his positioning, why his credibility was buried on page 3, and how a few high leverage tweaks could turn his cobbler shoes website into a premium lead magnet for his clients. Let's get into it.
Hi, I'm Steve Ash, and I trade as Comms Breakdown. I'm a freelance writer, I'm an author, I'm also a music producer, but primarily we're talking about my freelance writing, my content marketing, and the clients that I work with. Primarily, most of my clients are kind of technology companies, SaaS companies, accounting tech. I used to work for Xero back in the UK, so a lot of my clients came from that kind of Xero network of people. So I've worked with Dext, Go Cardless, lots of those kind of Xero app people. I now live in Australia. I started in the UK, so I'm kind of gradually putting out my feelers in the Australian network and bringing in kind of work from that side of things. I've been writing for a company called Business Fitness over here, who have some interesting accounting tech products. And I try to kind of broaden things out occasionally. I have kind of done work for AI companies, tech companies, construction businesses, things that are way kind of out of my usual kind of comfort zone. But writing about business to business is primarily kind of what I do. And a lot of my work these days is for a company called Boma Marketing. And they are a marketing company specifically for accountants. So I write the content that the accountants then send to their small business users. So it's a lot of kind of stuff around how do you improve your cash flow? How do you improve revenue? What's a business plan? What's a good strategic kind of plan for, scaling and all those kind of things? So a lot of it is about advice and kind of me having to be on top of what has happened around things like budgets. Recently we had the New South Wales budget in Australia, so I have to kind of go in, pull out what are the significant kind of things if you're a small business owner, what's going to affect you, what's good, what's not so good, those kind of things. So it's not journalism per se, but it's kind of in that kind of area of pulling out what is of interest to a small business owner and then trying to communicate it as clearly as possible. So a lot of what I do is this idea of things have happened, what does it mean for me? Or kind of trying to explain, like a tech company's proposition, basically, trying to get this idea of why should I come and look at your website? Why should I consider your software? What's it actually going to do for me? Because something that you find a lot with tech companies is they're so excited about their new features and, the new thing that they've released. They haven't actually stopped to think whether anyone wants it or whether they need it or whether it is in fact making their product better. So a lot of my kind of questions are being the independent observer of saying, well, why does anyone care about this? And making sure that, the content gets across. Actually, yeah, this is going to change the way you do things. This is going to save you time. It's going to save you money. It's going to open up your product to different markets, all those kind of things.
Totally. So you're basically have this like hybrid skill set where you are fundamentally a freelance writer, but you also have some voiceover work, and you're pretty much doing all of this in a pretty, even though it's all B2B, it's really heavily centered around kind of accounting software.
Yeah, that's definitely kind of like the main central hub, and occasionally kind of tech in other areas. I've written for UK tech companies that are working lights and optics and those kind of things. But I find it quite interesting sometimes to kind of go into a different area where you've got to get your head around what on earth is this thing about? Some of the more technical stuff, certainly around lasers and optics, I am definitely not an expert in those areas. So you've got to get somebody to explain to you how it works so that I can explain to a broader audience, this is what this optical technology actually does and why it's useful. Is it something that's going to be used in a nightclub, or is it something that's going to be used in a military defense system or something?
Totally. So let's go ahead and dive into your website. So, I mean, you have done a lot, and I'm looking at kind of your website, and I'm actually going to go kind of skip between your homepage and also your about page. And one of the first things that stands out to me is I see prompts breakdown in kind of all very big, which is your business name, cool. But then like in kind of white text, right, and almost invisible if you're not even paying that much attention, you see writer of words, maker of music, eater of chocolate. Lots of personality, but nothing here that signals to me what your actual niche is, which is, freelance writer for accounting tech.
Yeah, exactly. There's no real kind of tagline.
Yeah, and also why make your, to be a little bit blunt, but why is your company name so big when you can actually probably be using that as a logo, maybe in the upper left-hand side, and then you have your H1 be something that sounds a little bit more very specific to who your audience is.
Yeah, I mean, a logo is something that I have kind of thought about over time, and kind of I did have a sort of a version one of it maybe about 3-4 years ago that I had on kind of invoices and stuff. But because it's a long name, it's quite difficult to make it work. So I do have like a monogram, which is kind of like what comes up in the tab when you use the website. So I was thinking maybe a CB is actually probably easier, and then you can kind of write comms breakdown smaller, but CB is easier to kind of like actually put into things from a design point of view. It doesn't take up so much space, and it's more instantly recognizable.
Yeah, that could definitely work. But when I see this page and you go to your website, it's not immediately even clear to me that you're for hire. Because I see a cool blog post about music, and I'm like, okay, cool. This writer has a personality. They're like really into making music and stuff like that. But I'm not really even sure how to go about hiring you. And then you add on top of that the white text over a white background. It almost becomes a little bit hard to read. So I'm wondering if you should almost, even if you were to just keep it the way it is, flip the two around.
Yeah, I think probably the background image would be better if it was kind of more of a mid-tone, so that you've got the contrast against the dark, but you've also got the contrast against the white.
Yep, totally. And then I have to go into the hamburger menu to learn anything about you. So I kind of see about, books, contact, guest post, interviews, music, portfolio, writing killer content. So there's a lot of links right here. That's not necessarily bad, but I also do wonder what is the one that you want, a prospect or a client to see?
Primarily, I think the About Us page is that's what I would send to a client. That or the portfolio, where I've got the kind of the breakdown of who I have worked with and what I've done with them.
Yeah. So my question to you is, why is the About and the portfolio kind of hidden in a hamburger menu on your website and not necessarily the first thing that you see?
It's a good question. Here. It's a good question. I think primarily down to the fact that the theme doesn't promote that. So what I would probably need to do is go into WordPress and find a theme where I've got space on that homepage, because it's basically the WordPress site started out as a free blog site, and then I kind of upgraded it to a paid site where I own the domain and stuff. But the front page is still what would have been the blog. So if you go into that homepage, it looks like a blog page basically. And I think probably what's needed, like you say, is to have a homepage which is separate to the blog, where you've got room to set out your proposition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I bet, and that would instantly make it way more obvious to anyone who's checking you out that you're for hire. Because right now it just looks like, to me, as someone who also is always looking for freelance writers as well, it just to me feels like I wouldn't even know that you're for hire unless you told me or I went over here. And even this section, I wonder if you can make it a little bit cleaner. Like, what's the difference between writing killer content and portfolio?
Writing killer content was a page that I added when I was working with another client, because it links directly to an article about that topic, but it had to be separate from the rest of the site. Mm-hmm. So it's there basically as a kind of a landing page.
Got it. Would this work better as an article?
It probably would, but it had to be separate to the blog so that there was a separate URL, because Otherwise, it wouldn't kind of work within their site. So it had to be separate to the rest of the blog content. That was the only reason, basically.
Got it. I mean, I like the content. I'm just wondering if maybe if it shouldn't be in your navigation menu. Because I suspect it might be confusing a lot of people who are on your website.
Yeah. I mean, I think, fundamentally from a psychological point of view, until maybe COVID, I hadn't really had to promote myself. I hadn't had to be a salesperson for myself. Most of my work came to me through word of mouth and through recommendations, and there was a lot of work around. Post-COVID and kind of post-AI, I guess, I'm now in a position where I have to look around for work. So a lot of the sales, value offering stuff is not stuff that I've really had to do in the first maybe kind of, 6-7 years of the business. Work was coming to me. So I didn't have to work very hard to make the website good, if you see what I mean. But now there's more of a kind of a burning need for it, because that front page, like you say, is the first thing that a potential kind of client sees. So it needs a rework on that front page to kind of make it a home page and not a blog. I think that's the key thing. And like you say, the other information's there, but it's pretty much hidden away in that kind of burger menu.
Absolutely. And I almost wonder if, as a hacky workaround, and there's still things that I will point out here, but you almost might want to make your about page your homepage, because you actually are starting to hint at some of those things. Now, I'm going to nitpick a little bit and say having a stock photo right here instead of a photo of you, or something that, is a little bit more representative of the fact that you're a freelance writer and a music producer, and you have this niche within accounting tech, is probably what I would go for instead of a stock photo. Stock photo, to a lot of people, kind of reads as a little bit more generic and a little bit more safe. And if you're trying to command that, hey, I am niche, I am a premium writer in this space, stock photo does the opposite of that.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, like you say, a lot of this, I'm trying to think when I actually first did the website. So it's probably about 2016, 2017, something like that. So a lot of these images were the original images that we used when I set up the site. And I think I've changed the theme once in that time. But I think a lot of the photos are probably the original stock photos.
Totally. That's totally understandable. Hey, we all have the cobbler shoes problem where we're focusing all of our time on our clients and we don't always spend the same amount of time finding the right photos for us.
I mean, that's part of the issue, isn't it? Is, it's like the kind of the builder whose house is falling down, is you are always the last person to get your own advice.
Absolutely. And like, even here, like what you have here in the about section, honestly, as I said before, would be a good place for your homepage. I would maybe just fine tune this, and even this is an H1 could work well. Maybe to say freelance writer for B2B accounting tech by day, music producer by night. That is already pretty niche. And also this instant screen, hey, this is Steve, and this is not just X, Y, and Z commodity writer. This is somebody who's been doing this for a very long time, has a niche, is premium, and not a junior writer or ChatGPT.
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole junior senior thing is very much a double-edged sword. As a lot of companies will not consider senior writers because they don't want to pay the money that a senior writer kind of asks for. So, you don't want to kind of position yourself as too much out of the market, but at the same time, you have to kind of get across the knowledge and the experience that you've got. I've been writing since maybe 2008, kind of in a professional capacity within these kind of areas. So you have to get that across. But at the same time, I've had a lot of experiences recently with kind of potential clients where as soon as they find out, oh, he's actually kind of been doing this for 20 years and this is his fee, they don't want to know. What they want is a junior who will use Gemini or ChatGPT to kind of churn stuff out. So it's a difficult time in the market at the moment to be that senior person, because you've either got to be in-house and be the person who's dictating, right, okay, this is what you're going to be doing for your content, or you're going to be the junior writer at the bottom who's suddenly having to also become a video producer, social media expert. I've seen so many job adverts over the past kind of 6 months where people are expected to have this incredibly broad range of skills, where if you're going to be good at one of them, you're just not going to be good at the other one. Somebody who's a great writer is not necessarily the best video editor, all of these kind of things. So I'm slightly concerned as to where we're going in, marketing in general, as people being expected to be a jack of all trades or a Jill of all trades, rather than having a focus and saying, this is precisely what I do and where I add value. This is what I can do for you. It's very particular. It's very specialist, but it's really bloody good. That's the kind of the key thing to have in there. Whereas we're becoming more generic in our skill sets. Certainly that's how it seems to me, looking at, LinkedIn jobs and stuff like that. And I don't know whether that's a good thing. Maybe it gives people more opportunity, but also it means we're going less deep into our skill sets. You're okay and mediocre at a lot of things rather than being great at one thing, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a really interesting point. There's definitely a divide in the market where you're either expected to be the jack of all trades, or maybe a little bit of a T-shaped marketer, or you are the premium specialist in your area. My challenge to you is you're clearly the specialist, premium, but you have a generalist website. So my suspicion to you, from what I can just hear from what you're already saying here, is you're very passionate about writing. You're very passionate as in the accounting tech space. You have the clients, but no one would know that from your website. So if you were to, position your website, if you were to position your website in that way and start showing up in your marketing in that way, particularly leaning into the music angle plus the accounting tech, that's super unique. And you have all the logos that you have, all of the bylines, all the client experience. Lean into that and you'll be able to keep that premium position, because you're not suddenly now a category of one and you're not Steve, the content writer who's competing against everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there is a massive, I think the invention of AI and ChatGPT has made people really question the value of writing as a thing, because everyone thinks they can write now. Oh, I can put a prompt in and I can get something out. So we don't need a writer because I can do that bit. I know what we want to write. I can just get ChatGPT to, put something out, and then I'll maybe kind of put a few full stops in it. Mm-hmm. So the value that people see in writers has diminished, but that's because people don't understand what writers do. It's exactly what we were saying at the beginning, that a good writer isn't just somebody who puts words on a page. It's somebody who has this broad understanding of what is the value proposition, how am I going to pull out what the most important thing is, how am I going to get that across to people. Maybe some of them are experts in this field, but maybe some of them aren't. So I need to say it in terms which doesn't patronize the people who do know all the technical stuff, but at the same time is in plain enough English that anybody can go to this website and understand it. And that psychological element and that idea of value and being able to pull out the key points is what makes a writer great. But I don't think that comes across in the market as, if I'm a marketing manager or a head of marketing, the preconception is that a writer is somebody who puts words on a page. And to me, that's the sort of the end result of the whole process. It's not what you do. And I think AI has made that abundantly clear that that's the perception in the market, because people don't think they need that expertise anymore. Whereas they really do when you look at some of the content that's going out. Yes, it's all spelt correctly, and yes, it's grammatically correct, but it doesn't say anything. There's no human opinion. There's no angle. There's no point to it. It's very, very generic. The way that content marketing is working is very much like a kind of a sausage factory at the moment. It's like, get stuff out, make sure it's SEO enabled, make sure you get engagement. But has anybody stopped to say, is there an idea that's worth sharing in here? And that's used to be the fundamental starting point for content. What do we want to say? And is it interesting? And is it helpful? And does it have value? And that's diminished hugely, I would say, over the past kind of 10 years or so. a lot of kind of content marketing is basically firing stuff out and hoping that some of the mud sticks to the wall. And I'm not sure that that's a healthy progression, shall we say. We need to get back to, okay, use AI, use technology, use automation, make it efficient, but actually have something to say before you start. And I think that's sort of fundamental to content. There's no point getting a massive load of engagement for something if what you're saying nobody remembers, or nobody has an opinion on, or nobody engages with it. You know, you're getting the engagement, but without any of the conversion or any of the ideas in there. So, you know, it's a progression towards efficiency, but not necessarily a progression towards ideas. And for me personally, ideas are what content is about. If you're not going to have an idea, why even bother? You know.
Yeah. You have a lot of opinions and a lot of good hot takes, but again, going back to your website, none of this is really visible. And this is the type of things, particularly if you lean into your niche and your premium angle with that niche, is what makes you a category of one. So you're no longer competing against hundreds or thousands of other writers. You're now just competing with only other people who are the specialist in this niche, the specialist writer in this niche, and that commands a premium.
Yeah, absolutely. You know,
so kind of going back into this even more, if you want to kind of go even more into that premium category of one, get rid of all the stock photos. They're not helping you. And they're just going to make you look like every other writer that has the same copycat, the same typing on a computer. It's kind of cliche now. Yes, am I a little bit blunt in saying that? But I think, you know, you can either just not have any images at all, and the fact lean into the fact that you are a writer, so you can actually utilize that, or to showcase logos or case studies or things that you have. This is fine. It's a little bit repetitive. Maybe I would just say angle here is, can you share a little bit more about kind of your background with writing for X number of accounting tech companies, that sort of thing. This is great. Love the kind of images here. Love the fact that you're leaning into your music producing and remixing. That makes you way more unique as well. Again, maybe get rid of the stock photo. Voiceover artist is awesome. Maybe make that a little bit higher up on the page, so you can have this like really interesting brand where you can be like, hey, I am the specialist voiceover artist, music producer, and also, you know, maybe you get into podcast editing and freelance writing all in the accounting tech space. Now suddenly you're no longer just a freelance writer. You have this really big execution base all within your niche of skills that you already have, and that just makes you even more of a category of one. Oh, that's interesting. You also write books?
I do.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
So the first one I wrote was about 2018 or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it was basically around that killer content idea. So it was a whole book around how do you write great content? The idea was, if I'm a startup owner and I know nothing about content, but I also can't afford to hire an agency to do my content for me, how do I write it myself? That was the idea behind it. So that first book was kind of aimed at trying to get all of my ideas around why content should have ideas and humanity and storytelling in there. And then I subsequently wrote two more books, one which was called Going Freelance, about how to become a self-employed person, how to kind of balance work and life, you know, to be in charge of your own kind of career. And the third one there was that Help, I've Started a Business, which was sort of the same idea as the Going Freelance one, but for, you know, a small business owner or an entrepreneur or somebody who's never run a business to go, oh, I seem to have started a business, but I don't actually know what I'm doing. I don't know what cash flow is. I don't know how to market myself. So it's a very kind of, you know, each chapter's pretty short, but it's not kind of one of these business books that's full of high kind of ideas. It's, these are the practical things that you're going to need to do as a business owner. And then having done 3 books, I decided that fiction might be worth a try. Having had a conversation with my daughter about some of the books that she was reading, we kind of had this idea for a story around these little people that live down in the drains. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of an ecological message, this book. The basic idea is that there's these little eco warrior guys that live down in the drains, and they're getting totally fed up with humanity polluting their drains with plastic and crap and generally kind of making it unlivable for them. So they come out of the drains to try and sort us out and tell us that we need to take care of the planet. So it's a kind of a fantasy adventure, but with an ecological message in there. Probably aimed at about 8 to kind of 12-year-olds, but you could read it as an adult as well if you're into that sort of thing. It's probably quite heavily influenced by Terry Pratchett and kind of that kind of fantasy, but with your tongue in your cheek very much. It's got humor and it's got kind of the fantasy adventure elements, but it's, you know, it's got a message behind it as well. Like, you know, we need to take care of the planet. So that was the idea behind that one. These were all self-published through Amazon. So none of these are kind of, you know, blockbuster kind of sellers, but, you know, they're out there and they were enjoyable to write. That's the key thing for me. Usually I'm much more into the process of the actual writing than the following up and the marketing, as you can tell from the website.
Totally. I mean, the fact that you have 4 self-published books is already like big credibility, and you kind of have already buried this 3/4 of the way down your about page. And then also, why is the how to write killer content not the lead magnet on every page of your site?
It's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe you also can tweak it a little bit so it's a little bit more in your niche. But even without that, make that be your lead magnet, because not everyone's going to be ready to hire you right after that. But you can do that for get that email subscription, that email subscriber, be able to follow up, and now you're kind of nurturing people along.
Yeah. I mean, I think that first book probably needs a second edition too, because this was written before we had ChatGPT. So there's an awful lot of things have changed in that sort of time about how you would go about doing things and the efficiency kind of how you go about doing things. But the central ideas around why you're writing content are all still the same. So it probably needs an update. And then you could make it kind of more of a focal point.
Totally. And then make that your lead magnet, kind of lead with that. Even if it becomes a loss leader and you give it away for free, you're probably going to make a lot more money off of it long term if you make that lead magnet on every page in your site. And then, okay, I see a photo. That's awesome. A little bit more about you. Very nice. Again, you kind of know what I'm saying.
That one isn't a stock photo.
Yeah, of course. I love that photo. I love the photo of your books. Make that be higher. That could honestly be like this about page. Even just the way it's written right now, even without the tweaks, would be better converting as their homepage than your current homepage. And that's very easy to set up in WordPress by itself. And then the other piece I have for you is, do you really need comments, particularly on an about page?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it kind of needs a review and an update. I think that's the key thing. And you know, as we said, it's always the last thing that you look at because you're doing the work. But obviously, you're not going to win any more work unless you've got a central hub and a social presence and a networking presence that actually works within your niche. So yeah, there's lots of things that could be done to kind of improve it and make it a lot more convertible.
Absolutely. And I'd almost challenge you to be like, so you don't even have a primary CTA on your website right now. You just kind of tell people to read a blog post. Even if you just make that primary CTA right now, just download the lead magnet, or ideally have a contact form to hire you or book a call, whatever that ends up looking like. That alone, by adding that primary CTA, plus having a secondary CTA to the lead magnet, is going to do numbers for your positioning as a category of one niche writer instead of having to compete with everyone else.